Hi there. I'm Jake Hickok, the IT and Communications Manager for Quanta Aviation Services Group. As a subject matter expert in radio communications, I oversee the features and programming of the TDFM 9100. You can find me at the PJH Red Bluff office upstairs in Building 100. Feel free to reach out to me via email, phone, or just drop by in person if you have any questions. I'm here to help. A lot of this training will reference the 9100 Radio Summary Guide. This is a PDF called TDFM 9100 Radio Summary and can be found on Google Drive in Flight Ops Radio Guides. It's nice to keep an updated laminated printout of this in the door pockets. The version number in the upper right is used for document version control. Radio programming, often called radio loads or code plugs, originally came about to assist with fire contracts and fire response. Anything preloaded saved a lot of time and avoided errors when hand programming while on the ramp or in the air. When the 9100s came out, I realized I could preload a lot more than just the fire channels into the radios. With the exception of contractual requirements like a fire contract, the radio load is not meant to be the latest and greatest. Lots of little changes happen over the year, like MJ Electric changes the PL tone on their channel 5, or a project like Sunzia comes up with 6 to 8 channels across a job, and any one of our airframes can suddenly be assigned to it. There's no feasible way to maintain those changes across the growing fleet of 50 plus 9100s scattered across the nation with multiple radio load updates. Instead, we standardize on the behavior and features of the radio to help with pilot familiarity across all of our avionics tools and update the preloaded content when it makes sense. The timing of those updates typically occurs when the airframe is out of service for a while or targeted before a contract or a major project. The avionics departments for PJ and Winco are both tooled up to update 9100s to the latest radio load version whenever needed. In order to fill the gap between the radio's last update and today, we rely on 3 items: the subcontractor frequency list on G Drive, front panel programming, or FPP for short, to add a channel on the fly that isn't pre-programmed, and the job zone when we need a custom group of channels for a project like Sunzia or Gateway. The subcontractor radio frequencies.pdf is on Google Drive in the operations folder and is typically updated as soon as I'm made aware of Intel changes out in the field, which then syncs to your field tech devices when connected. Those channels are found in the subzone of the 9100. All right, let's start playing. We're going to use a knob. Press and hold the knob to turn the radio on and off. The firmware version and the frequency range of each radio module in the 9100 will show on boot up. These radios are set to not turn on automatically with the Avionics Master. It's set that way to avoid having to pull the master breaker mid-flight if the radio freezes up and becomes unresponsive, which has been a thing. Recent firmware updates have seemed to stabilize those issues, anywhere past 2.08, but I still do not trust it enough to change the setting back to automatic. The 9100 is a lot of radio. It can be intimidating to those not used to it, especially coming from a TDFM 136 or NAT or other 9100s that aren't set up beyond factory settings. I hope this helps you become familiar with the radio and its features. The 9100 has 2 literal radios in one, Band 1 and Band 2. Band 1 on the top line is VHF only, covering frequencies in the 150 to 174 megahertz range. Band 2 is on the middle line and covers both VHF and UHF, which adds 450 to 470 megahertz frequency range. The soft menu button labels are on the bottom line. Those correspond to 3 dash buttons, which you see here. These can change throughout the use of the radio, different labels, and you'll just kind of go diagonal to whatever the label is to the button. The triangle shows which band you're using and will transmit on. Switch between the two with the band key. Because these are 2 separate radios in one, each band will have independent volume and settings. If I change the volume in band 1, currently I'm on volume 15, and I switch over to band 2, you'll see my volume changed down to 9. I could set this to 11, go back to band 1, still at my 15, band 2 is at the recently changed 11. There are green lights on left and right edges of the band, which reflect if the radio is receiving a signal or transmitting a signal. If the radio is receiving a signal, it'll show here to the left of the respective band. When transmitting, you'll see a light on the right side. Unlike the TDFM 136 or other radios with one single list of hundreds of channels to scroll through, the 9100 organizes channels into zones. This helps group similar channels together and avoids a single list of 600 channels to scroll through. The explanation of each zone is provided on the summary guide. The zone will display in front of the channel name with the 2 or 3 letter acronym. In this case, I have 2 dashes. The furthest left soft key will typically always be zone. The next 2 will change depending on what the channel options are programmed. The up and down buttons, 5 and 8, will scroll the soft key menu items up and down or left right if there are more than what fits on the screen. The memory up and memory down, 4 and 7, are memory channels up and down, similar to turning the knob in channel mode. Bright and dim adjust the display's brightness. TSW adjusts ABC on the display, and it is not programmed for anything at the moment. It does not matter what these letters are. ESW, the 0 key, is set to talk around, sometimes called direct mode, for repeater channels. This is rarely used in the field, but is needed sometimes when working with government fire agencies or if a job site repeater is not working properly. When this is on, the radio transmits on the repeater's receive frequency, which bypasses the repeater and talks directly to radios on the ground within range of you. Most of our non-fired channels are programmed as a non-repeated channel, also called a simplex or a direct channel. The up arrow is displayed on these channels. For a repeater channel, this up arrow will display, and the 0 changes into a /0 when you're in talk around mode. Press and slightly hold down home to take you straight to PJ1 or Winco 1, respectively, regardless of where you are in the radio. The F1 and F2 keys are programmable quick memory keys. You can customize quick recalls to any channel. I explain more of this in the tips and tricks section near the end. F3 produces an audible tone so you can adjust and troubleshoot volume in your headset. The F4 key turns off all receive tones and opens squelch to troubleshoot receive problems. A quick press gives you a momentary check. Press and hold it for about 4 seconds and it'll lock it in until you press it again. The M displays when there is no receive tone, either from this F4 key or if the program channel doesn't have a receive tone programmed. If you see the radio receive light come on, but you're not hearing anything, pressing F4 should let you hear what the radio hears and determine if you have the wrong receive tone or mode programmed, or if there's interference out of your control and you should move to a different channel. The function key allows us to reach the configure menu. We do not use the crossband repeat or the simulcast and only go into the maintenance mode if troubleshooting something with the avionics or the maintenance department. Configure walks us through a wizard of changing some of the global radio wide settings. The first 4 toggle on and off everything the multi-select knob does. By default, we minimize the knob options to channel and volume to reduce complexity, but I'll explain some of the exceptions. We want the volume to be enabled. We want the channel to be enabled so we can change channels. Here we disable the zone because we change zones with the soft key instead. So we're going to leave that disabled. Click enter. Numlock allows us to lock the number keypad up, 1 through 9 and #0*. We don't enable this because we don't normally have accidental key presses on the radio. So we're going to disable it, click enter. Recall is normally off, but if it is enabled, this allows you to directly type in a channel number to go to that channel instead of scrolling. Since we don't normally publish channel numbers in the 9100 because they can change between radio loads and we provide more efficient ways to avoid bouncing around the wide span of channels, we keep recall off. However, the CalFire contracts have a kneeboard cheat sheet with channel numbers, and the CalFire Zone matches those channels. If you prefer to directly enter channel numbers off that cheat sheet, enable this recall function, which will put a third action on your knob press. If you find yourself constantly entering channel numbers in, see if configuring the job zone would better fit your needs. I'll explain more about that job zone in the tips and tricks section near the end of this radio. For now, we'll leave this disabled and click enter. The knob default is going to be volume. It can select between any options that you have enabled. It'll toggle between the two. We'll leave this as volume for now. Page 3 revert disabled as default. We'll just leave this as default. Leave this as default. Leave this as default. Always on, we have disabled. And side tone allows you to adjust your side tone at your discretion. We found 14 as an average volume, but if there's a change that's needed, you can adjust it here. We're going to click the home key to get out, exit this wizard. CalFire and US Forest Service uses repeaters with multiple transmit tones to select between mountaintops. On other radios, these often have to be programmed with each tone or mountaintop per channel. On the 9100, we only need to program the repeater channel once, and then use the MPO key to change transmit tones. Newer pilots in the 9100 and fire response often miss this feature. so pay attention. MPL will show up on any channel where it's been programmed to allow you to select the transmitting CTCSS PL tone. Right now, there's no MPL here. Let's change our zone over to the CalFire zone. And you'll see right off the bat, CDF command 1 allows multiple PL. So the MPL key shows up corresponding to the soft key here. Push in the MPL button, brings up by default MPL is off. If we just start turning the knob, you'll see tone 1 and then the tone frequency. CalFire and the Forest Service in Region 5 in California refers to tone numbers 1 through 32. Forest Service outside of California and other agencies might refer to a mountain or repeater name. You'll have to defer to a local intel and cheat sheets to know what tone frequency that name references and then select the tone. For instance, if Lucky Butte repeater shows 156.7 as a tone, you'll need to find and select that in the MPL list. These are not in numerical order. They're in tone number order. So 156.7 is tone 6. So we'll select tone 6 in that case. And now CDF command 1 is set to tone 6. If I change channels to channel 2, the MPL is off. I have not set MPL for CDF command 2. If I go back to channel 1, it quickly shows you, hey, you're on tone 6, CDF command 1. That is remembered throughout the radio on band 1 on this channel. You'll also find MPL available for DEC and NIFC TAC channels where they might require tone on a specific fire incident. MPL only changes the transmit tone. The receive tone is defined in the programming. In the rare instance you need to change the receive tone for some reason, then use FPP instead to add a new channel with the parameters needed. You cannot FPP in a channel and ask it to use MPL. MPL can only be added through the programming software. One side note here with US Forest Service, you might find local intel or incident lists where a receive tone is added to the DEC or TAC channels, and you'll notice the pre-programmed channel in the 9100 does not have a receive tone. This is okay and will work just fine. The receive tone is only there to avoid hearing interference from neighbors on the same frequency. In this case, you will need to FPP a new TAC channel instead. FPP allows us to add new channels or edit existing channels into the radio without the software and computer. It also lets us review what is pre-programmed into a channel. A zone needs to have FPP enabled in order to add or edit a channel. In order to protect some zones and channels from edits, not all zones have FPP enabled. The summary guide will show which zones have FPP enabled. There are two important gotchas here that often catch pilots. One gotcha, the FPP button will always show regardless if FPP is enabled or not. If you're in a zone where FPP is not enabled, pressing FPP allows you to review what is programmed in the channel. It will even let you change items. For instance, I can set that to 151245. Next. Go through, everything default. And I'm back to CDF command 1. Because the CalFire zone is not FPP enabled, that frequency change I did, if I push FPP again, did not save. It reverted back to what's pre-programmed in the channel. The other gotcha, if you use FPP to review the programming of a channel that does not have a PL or DCS tone programmed, it will display a tone of 67.0 in your receive and transmit. If I switch to the PJ zone, PJ1 does not have a tone pre-programmed in for receiver transmit. But if I click FPP and I go through and I check, it shows a receive tone of 67.0 and a transmit tone of 67.0. That is not accurate. That is a bug in the Motorola's radio, the internal radio of the 9100. The primary FPP zone we want to use in our 9100 is the FPM zone. The FPD zone is to program a P25 digital channel. This is extremely rare and is typically only used when working with the national parks and other federal agencies or a law enforcement mission. Also a quick note, the D for digital here is for P25 digital, which is a public safety version of digital. It is not the same digital as a lot of our subcontractor and utilities use, which is called Moto Turbo or DMR. There's no aircraft radio that can currently use those other digital modes. So 99% of the time, you'll select the FPM zone. This is our standard spot to add an analog channel into the radio. The M stands for mixed receive, which means it will transmit and receive analog, but also receive digital P25 if needed. But again, we can ignore the digital stuff for our day-to-day use. When we are in an FPP enabled zone, let's select a channel to edit and press FPP. In this case, I like to choose FPM channel 3 and then select FPP. It'll bring up a wizard to program the channel. Enter the receive frequency and click next to continue. Back if you made a mistake, and exit to leave the wizard. Receive frequency 161.3125. Let's click next. It's going to ask us for a transmit frequency. If it's not a repeater, the transmit and receive frequency and the tone should be the same. Transmit 161.3125, and then click next. The receive mode can be set mixed or analog. Do not select digital or you will not hear anything. So if I change the three options, it goes mixed, analog, or digital. You can leave it as mixed, or you can set it to analog if you prefer. Either one will work. The transmit mode will leave as analog. This bounces you between analog or digital. Then it's going to ask you for your receive CTCSS tone. This is where you select a receive tone. If your receive tone is a DCS or DPO number, then set this to off and select next. So I can go through the list of tones, or I can go back one on the knob and it goes to off. And if I select off and I click next, it asks me what my DCS tone is. If I set a tone here and I click next, it does not ask me for the DCS tone. Afterwards, it's going to ask me for transmit CTCSS. In this case, you also can click off, which then will ask the DCS tone for transmit. Or I can click back and actually set a tone here as well. The receive and transmit NAC can be ignored for an analog channel. These are for digital P25 use only. So just click next and next for default here. 293, next, and next. Next, it's going to ask you to change the zone name. Please do not change the zone name or you'll cause a lot of confusion for future pilots. So we're going to leave this as is and click next. The channel name is where you can edit the channel name letter by letter. We're going to turn the knob to select the character, press the knob to move to the next character, and when finished, we're going to click the next key. If it asks for talk group ID, that's also for digital. We can just leave that as is and click next. It'll then drop us out. And now we have PXR2 with 161.3125 and a tone of 100 for transmit and receive. Your channel is now programmed. If you weren't in an FPP enabled zone, none of your actions would have been saved. There is a special FPP zone in PJ 9100s for our fire responses. The incident zone, INC, is an FPP zone of 11 channels with pre-entered channel names for air tactics, air ground command, air to ground tactical, deck, crew, and so on. The common channel names are already entered in hopes to save time editing the names, and the pilot just has to add the matching frequencies. If you know your air tactics frequency, then just change it. We already have the name changed. Now air tactics, I just programmed in 151.295 with a tone of 110.9. I don't have to stand there and go through all the characters to build air tactics. I know it's there. You can do similar for the other channels. Some pilots prefer this. In that case, it becomes a quick rotation between those 11 channels, bouncing between air-to-ground TAC, air-to-ground tactics, air-to-ground command, the crew net if there's a crew, deck, or PJ1. The subzone has FVP enabled also, but there is no room there to add new channels. It's simply enabled to allow you to edit a channel if you run across an error because a customer changed their programming since the last radio load. If that is the case, go ahead and make the change, but please get those changes to me so the subcontractor frequency list can be updated and future radio loads updated as well. All right, let's check out some of the tips and tricks of the 9100. The guard zone has a channel name in it that reflects the type of radio and the radio load version. In the guard zone, you'll have the typical guard channels, PJ1, Air Guard, National Flight Following, and then a fourth channel that tells us the radio load and the type of radio. So in this case, this is a V for VHF. If you pulled this up on band 2, it would be a U. 24 for the year, and then F for the revision. Avionics or myself will ask for that if we're troubleshooting the radio with you, so we know we're on the same page. H91 or H97 here will tell you, it'll tell us what type of radio it is behind the scenes. The rig zone is a digital version of PJ1. You'll see here, rig zone, rigging digital PJ1, PJ2, PJ3. This is prepping for a future project I'll explain later in an email when we're ready to go live with it. It is meant to go with the new rigging ground crew radios that PJ and QAS have recently invested in for the heavy lifted jobs. For now, you can ignore the rig zone. The F1 and F2 keys are the quick memory recall keys I mentioned earlier. If you have a small job that you find yourself constantly switching between company and a couple of contractor or utility channels, this is your friend. It lets you bounce between a couple favored channels back and forth. If you're bouncing between PJ1, Crux 4, and PJ Tate 102, PG&E Tate 102, for instance, let's do that. I know the PG&E Tate is going to be UHF, so I'm going to switch bands down to here. And Crux is in sub. So I'm going to select sub. I want Crux 4. I'm going to press and hold the F1 key for about 2 or 3 seconds. There's no feedback. You just kind of have to time it. And then I'm going to change zone to PG&E. I'm going to change the channel to Tate 102. I'm going to press and hold the F2 key for about 3 seconds. Now, a quick press of F1 takes us straight to sub Crux 4. Quick press of F2 takes us to PG&E Tate 102. Press and hold home takes us to PJ1. So you can bounce between those 3 frequencies pretty quick. This changes, remember, each of these radios are independent. So what you set for band 2 is not in band 1. If I click band 1 and I click F1, it's going to take us to what the default is. I haven't set that up, so it just took us there to PJ1. But I could say that, I could set quick memory key to PJ4, press and hold F1, go up a few channels, call out 1, I'll put that into F2. Now I can bounce back and forth pretty quick between those 2. Change bands, and I'm still between these 2 quick release or quick memory channels. The job zone is a new feature I've introduced into the 9100 back in radio load version 24B. Any earlier radio load does not have this function and needs an update to enable it. The job allows you to build a custom zone of 16 random channels of your choosing. This feature best fits larger projects like Gateway or SunZia, where you have more than 2 channels you're switching between, and that quickly outgrows the F1 and F2 quick memory keys. It also works really well on the CalFire exclusive use contracts, where most of your dispatches are in a localized area on the same 5 to 8 channels. So you can set your initial attack list up in job in the first half, and then leave the second half for a more distant response, and not have to constantly scroll and bounce around 200 channels in the CalFire zone. Let's build a small utility zone for a small utility job. We're going to click zone. Let's go over to job. We're going to click select. Notice our soft keys changed to CHAN and zone program. FPP is not there at the moment. Let's go ahead and click the zone program key to start the wizard to program the job zone. The first question it asks you is, what channel do you want to edit? We could have started off by changing our channel number and then clicking zone program, but the wizard includes the selection of channel. So right now we're on channel 1, blank. You can see we can scroll through the 16 blank channels that job zone has. Once we select channel we want to edit, we're going to click edit to change the channel. We can click delete to delete it and make it blank again, or we can click exit to exit the wizard. Let's click edit. Now with search options, it allows us to channel name or list selection. We always want to use list selection, the default. So let's click select. It's then going to ask us what zone is the channel in that we want to put into channel 1. Typically for job zones and for anything, a lot of pilots like to use PJ1, channel 1. So we know PJ1 is in the zone, is in the PJ zone. We're going to click select for PJ zone. Select channel, PJ1, select. And now PJ1 is in the job zone channel 1. If we turn the knob right here, it takes us to 2 blank. If we go back, you can see PJ1 is there. Let's move to 2 blank. This is going to be a small utility job. So let's say we're going to work with Brink, and we want Brink 10 and Brink 11 on this as well. So channel 2 blank, we're going to say edit, list selection. As default, we're going to click select. Brink, what zone is it in? Brink is in the sub zone. Nope. Let's go back. I made a mistake. Brink is in the sub zone. So instead of, we're going to select the zone first before I click select. Click select. Let's change this. There's Brink 10 and 11 right off the bat, alphabetical order. So Brink 10, select. And now channel 2 of the job zone is Brink 10. Let's move over to the 3rd blank channel. Let's edit, select. Let's change the zone to sub. And let's put Brink 11 in here. Select. Also, we're working with PG&E on this job, and they have a couple VHF channels they use, some of their color channels they use. So let's go to 4, which is currently blank. We're going to edit that, select PG&E zone, select, and we're using V4 silver on this job. And one more on the 5th channel, edit, select, PG&E, we're using V3 tan, select. So you just saw us pull different channels from different zones into this custom zone, 1 through 5, channels 1 through 5. When we're done with this wizard, we're going to click exit. And now you'll see in our job zone, channel 1 is PJ1. If I start selecting channels, channel 2 is Brink 10. Channel 3 is Brink 11. Channel 4 is V4 silver. Channel 5 is V3 tan. And then you got the further blanks. So this allows you to do a quick knob between 5 different channels on the fly. This is great for fires as well, for fire contracts. In this case, you would have, for instance, the local dispatch channel for your initial attack. You're going to have probably a local command channel as well, and then your air to ground frequency and your air tactics frequency. And PJ1 as well to talk to your own crew. So let's go back where we have these channels already in here. Let's go zone program. We like PJ1 to be in PJ1. So we'll go to next, zone program 2. Let's bring 10. Let's edit it. Let's select. Let's change it. We're going to go CalFire. We're going to go Mendocino local net. And now Mendocino local net dispatch net for Mendocino is on channel 2. So go to 3. The selection. Change it to CalFire. And I'm going to also use Command 8. I'm going to select Command 8. Then I'm going to go Program Zone V4 Silver. I'm going to edit that, select it. And then we're going to go to our air to ground, which is going to take a little bit of, you got to scroll slow. If I scroll too fast, it's too fast for the radio. These channels, this whole list is in the order of the CalFire kneeboard cheat sheet. So you can use that reference from your CalFire contract. It's on Google Drive in the CalFire contract folder. You can use that to know where you're at in the CalFire zone. Mendocino unit uses CalFire CDF air to ground 1. So we're going to select that. And now we'll go to V3 TAN. We don't want anything more in our job zone. So I'm going to just hit the delete key and it blanks it out. And we didn't have anything in 6, so we're good there. Now we can just exit out of the wizard. And now my job zone PJ1 is channel 1. Channel 2 is the Mendocino unit with no PL tone. Channel 3 is CDF Command 8 with no PL tone. I could set tone 4. And now that CDF Command 8 tone 4. And then channel 4 is CDF air to ground 1. If I go back to channel 3, it knows I had tone 4 selected. If I go to dispatch unit or Mendocino local net for dispatch, I don't have any MPL tone. MPL, set that to tone 2. So you can bounce back and forth between these really fast. You can have a few more channels in there for your dispatch. You're always going on dispatch and then air to ground 1 and maybe TAC 3, TAC 4, and a command net. Day in and day out. And because Mendocino's a large unit, you're probably gonna have to change tones throughout the day. So instead of having to program multiple MEUs, remember, just quick, we're on tone 2. Now we're on tone 8. Select. Mendocino local net tone 8. Change it again. Mendocino local net tone 5. That's the power of the job zone, where you can just get all these different channels all mixed together into one small grouping and then just have a quick little flick of the knob to bounce between the different channels. Something that completely outgrows the smaller jobs where you just have F1 and F2 and the home key. You can set this up for projects for SunZia. If the channel is not already in here, you can also do FPP. So for instance, if I go to zone, FPM, and I believe, no, which channel did we change? PXR2. I want PXR2 into that job zone. I can make whatever channel frequency I want and channel in FPM. Let's go back to the job zone. Go back to zone program. 5th is my next blank channel. I'm going to edit that. The selection, FPM, select, and find our PXR2 channel and select. Now we exit. And now channel 5 is the PXR2 channel. So now we just put a completely custom frequency channel name into a completely custom zone name on the 9100. Notice it changes a little bit down here. FPP is here. If I change it down to MEU, FPP bounces over and MPL shows up here. So watch your soft keys. These change depending on what channel you're on and what functions pre-programmed into those channels. Notice back on these other channels where the soft keys change, MPL and FPP, the zone program just disappeared. It's still there. Remember the up and down for the soft key buttons. Scrolls these menu options over. So zone program is still there. If you know you're in the job zone and you're not seeing the zone program here, you can scroll up and down with that. Also, the job zone is not FPP enabled. So even though you know this is an FPP channel and FPP shows up, all this does is review what you have programmed in there. It does not remember any changes. If I change this from 100 to 97.4, continue through the wizard, and then finish out. We even found a little bug in the radio actually right here by doing that. And look at that, I just locked up the radio. This is why we don't have the power automatically on. We want to reset the radio. We don't have to push down the avionics master. We just can push the knob. Or in this case, we're going to have to click avionics master. Don't FPP a channel in the job zone and make a change. So I'm actually going to report that to Technosonic. But the FPP is not to change the frequency in the job zone. If you want to change PXR2, you need to change your zone back to FPM, back to the original zone where PXR2 is. Change it there, then come back here and select PXR2. We know it's tone 100. Let's see if that works. Let's go back to FPM. I'm actually curious. I haven't tested this yet. PXR2. Edit it. Next. Tone 97. Transmit tone 97. We don't have to finish that. We just click exit. We're in there. Yep, made those changes. So we can just click exit to shortcut out. Now we go back to the job zone. There's PXR2. I'm curious, did it change the zone on the fly or change the tone on the fly? It did. Awesome. So you cannot make changes to FPP in the job zone. You have to go to the original zone where it is. You can use FPP just to review what's in there. Also, let's remember 2 different radios, band 1 and band 2. Band 1 job is different than band 2 job. If we go down to band and change our zone to the job zone, these are all blank. There are no channels programmed in the job zone here. So now I just put PJ1 and channel 1. Channel 2 has tape 101. In the job zone, you can even use the F1 and F2 keys. Push and hold the F2 for a little bit for job tape 101. And let's change over to Winco 1. I'm going to put that as F1. And now change over to Forest Service Zone. F2 takes us to the job zone, tape 101. F1 takes us to Winco 1. Different than the band 1 job. Band 1, F1, takes us to PJ4, which we did earlier in the training. F2 to CalR 1. And then back to our job zones. And it remembers the tones we selected for both MEU and CDF Command 8. That's the job zone.